r/AskReddit. What's a let that sink in fun fact? Fanta started as a Coca-Cola substitute in 1940s Nazi Germany. So if you like Fanta you must be a Nazi. And the Volkswagen Beetle was commissioned by Hitler. Shit, the Beetle was my favorite car growing up. Guess I was a Nazi kid/s. We were taught in school he actually started Volkswagen himself, or rather heavily influenced somebody to do so. Whenever this comes up, it blows my mint that we were taught so wrong. Over the space of 3 days, an estimated 165 people survived both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bomb attacks. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is one of the more famous ones, who was only 2 miles from ground zero when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. It hit when he was walking to work on the last day of a work trip. After he heard the drone of a plane, he looked up at it, and the sky lit up. He was then plucked from the ground, spun around and tossed into a nearby potato field. Miraculously he survived, despite being covered in burns, soaked in radiation, and with 2 blown eardrums. He spent a night in an air shelter, then took an overpass sleeper train home to Nagasaki to see his family. When he made it to a hospital in Nagasaki he was so burnt a childhood friend didn't recognize him. Neither did his family. Despite his wounds he made it to work the next day. He started giving his boss a rundown on what happened, and his boss thought he was crazy. There was no way one bomb could destroy a city. Suddenly, a bright light lit up the room. He panicked and dropped to the floor of the office seconds before the shockwave smashed out the office windows. He had just been hit twice by a nuclear blast in the space of 3 days. At the age of 93 he was given the title Nagiyo Hibakusha, or twice bombed person. He died the next year. So next time you think you're having a shitty week at work, yeah. In the lifetime of a Japanese person, they went from samurai swords to nuclear weapons, 1867 to 1945. My dog rolled in something really awful today. It was so bad I was dry heaving and sobbing as I washed him. I'm pregnant so smell was intensified. But, I wasn't bombed twice. Thanks for the perspective. All 6 of the stars of Friends negotiated 2% syndication rights for the show. Friends still makes about $1 billion yearly through reruns, Hulu etc. All 6 Friends collect a $20 million check annually. Yes, that means David Schwimmer still gets $20 million a year for doing nothing. So when you are alone in your one Brit apt, watching Friends and snickering how any of them are losers who haven't been famous since, there's a reason why. They don't have to work, ever again. This is the case with several people who've lost their star power like Frankie Muniz, left acting, became a pro F1 driver which, still is rich, and Jessica Alba, successful businesswoman who owns a company valued at over 100 million. We ridicule them for their fading star, but in reality they are still wealthy thanks to various business deals, and the like, while we are still hammering away at our shitty 9-to-5 jobs. Schizophrenia's hallucinations are shaped by culture. Americans with schizophrenia tend to have more paranoid and harsher voices/hallucinations. In India and Africa people with schizophrenia tend to have more playful and positive voices. There's a really new treatment for it called avatar therapy. It has a computer character mimic the particular person's malicious hallucinations, but gradually over time its voice and expressions become more friendly and controllable by the patient. Apparently this treatment has the effect of giving the patient more control over the hallucinations and either getting rid of them completely or making the hallucinations more positive in nature. It may be that auditory hallucinations, hearing voices, is a case of the patient's own subvocalizations. In an experiment using a microphone taped to a patient's throat, the researcher could hear the soft mutterings of the voice in her head coming from the patient. That is the creepiest shit. The United States hasn't minted any new Purple Heart medals since World War II. We've been using the stockpile that was prepared in anticipation of a ground invasion of Japan. Dang, that's morbid, but super interesting. A lot of estimates place the potential death toll of a ground invasion at 1 million American lives. Dropping the bombs was devastating, but we did it for a reason. They did say it was gonna take millions of US troops and possibly the extermination of the Japanese people to pacify Japan, but I didn't realize it was that bad. Wow. Scientists who work with cockroaches often develop allergies towards cockroaches. At the same time, they also develop allergies to pre-ground coffee. I don't like where this is going. Edit. Duck. It went there. Also heard that people that get bit by cockroaches often develop allergies for both cockroaches and shellfish. Heard of a guy in my city who bred roaches for reptile food. He was going to clean out one of the emptied terrariums. He opened the hinged plastic lid too hastily, and a cloud of roach poop dust hit him in the face. Without any previous allergy, he still instantly fainted from anaphylactic shock. Goddamned most disgusting animal on earth. Oh, and there are apparently 4,500 species of cockroach, of which only 30 are considered pests. Okay, I'm freaking myself out, and my skin is itching just thinking about this. I'm leaving this thread now. Are you trying to tell me there is ground up cockroach in my pre-ground coffee, or am I missing the point? Yeah, that's essentially it. Essentially the factor is, where they grind up coffee generally have cockroaches that also get ground up and added to your coffee. Google's DeepMind self-learning AI AlphaZero spent 4 hours learning chess and proceeded to beat the top chess engine in the world. The particularly interesting part is that it wins by playing in a very human way. Chess engines tend to run algorithms to assess a board after a move is chosen, looking at millions of moves every second, and decide who's better, based on a set of parameters, making their play very direct. AlphaZero seemed to develop a far more human playstyle, somehow seeing something less quantifiable that led to an advantage in a position. Over the past 200 years, numerous chess masters studied a style of play similar to AlphaZero. That means that in 4 hours, AlphaZero developed a better understanding of the game than we could over the 1000 plus years it has been studied. But can it love? Can you? The Giza Sphinx is so old that it was the ancient Egyptians themselves who performed the first restoration after digging it from under the dunes over 1000 years after it had been built. More time passed between the building of the pyramids and Cleopatra's reign than has passed between her and us now. Even in King Tut's time, the pyramids were considered ancient, even as we now consider him ancient. There was a time in history when trees existed, but the fungi which causes wood to rot had not yet evolved to digest wood. Dead trees and plants would pile up, and the 35% oxygen atmosphere caused massive fires. This is also the time where petrified wood came from. Trees would sit in mud for thousands of years and not rot, while minerals slowly replaced the wood structures. Fires in 35% oxygen and wood everywhere. I'd be ducking petrified too. Not to mention the oxygen-rich air allowed bugs to grow to huge sizes. Imagine 1 to 2 foot long dragonflies buzzing by you. Let me build on this. Before trees existed en masse, the earth was covered in giant mushrooms. It took humanity approximately 4 times longer to switch from copper swords to steel swords than it took to switch from steel swords to nuclear bombs. When will we get nuclear swords? And it took humans approximately 50 times as long to switch from stone tools to bronze than it did to switch from bronze to firearms. The sinking of the Titanic was a miracle to the lobsters in the galley. You just sent me into the upside down. This is literally a let that sink in fact. The Titanic had 2 sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic. There was a woman called Violet Jessop, a nurse and a cruise liner stewardess, that worked on all 3. The Olympic crashed into a warship whilst leaving harbor, but was able to make it back. She was on the Titanic as it sank, and is referenced in the Titanic film, a stewardess that was told to set an example to the non-English speaking passengers as the ship sank. She looked after a baby on lifeboat 16 until being rescued by the Carpathia the next day. It's not known what exactly caused the sinking of the Britannic, but the lifeboats hit the water too early. As the ship sank, the reel listed up, and a number of the lifeboats were sucked into the propellers. Violet had to jump out of the lifeboat she was in, and sustained a serious head injury, but survived. She was on board for all 3 incidents in the space of 5 years. She went back to continue to work at sea for another 30 years before retiring in 1950. She died of heart failure in 71. When the Britannic was sinking, she returned to her cabin and grabbed her toothbrush, because that is what she missed most after the sinking of the Titanic. Another fun fact, Captain E.J. Smith, captain of the Titanic, was also the captain of the Olympic when it collided with the Hawk. Probably too late for this to be seen, but if you take into account the fact that on average people sleep, or should sleep, 8 hours a day, when you get 99 years of age, you will have only been awake for 66 years, having spent 33 years of your life sleeping. That's why I always stay up late. Open your ducking eyes, sheeple, the government is stealing your years. Getting insufficient sleep shortens your lifespan. Relatable. There was only 65 years between the Wright brothers' first flight and the moon landing. Wow, this is the one that didn't even need to sink in for me. Technology advances so fast. It was less than 10 years between the Wright brothers' first flight and planes being used in war. Since its discovery in 1930, Pluto has not yet made a full orbit of the sun. It went from undiscovered to planet to not planet in less than a Pluto year. There was a Korean man conscripted by the Imperial Japanese Army. He was then captured by the Soviets and conscripted, being moved to the Western Front to be captured and, shockingly, conscripted by the Wehrmacht. He was then at Normandy when it was attacked on D-Day. He was captured by the US and held as a prisoner. They sent numerous interpreters, but none of these Japanese speakers could understand him. He eventually became a US citizen. You think you're having a bad day, just think of him. On the bright side, he survived the war. Cows kill more Americans than terrorists. Most years, those cows have for their priorities all wrong, man. They should be killing the terrorists, not the Americans. We need to get rid of those cows. Go back to Cowland. As you get closer to black hole, time goes slower. This means that everything farther away would experience time faster and faster as you get closer and closer to the black hole. A second for you could be a billion years for those outside of it. Thus, if you fell into a black hole and looked outside, you would see the universe die with you. Don't let me leave, Murph. But you won't exactly see the universe speeding up in reality, because the light from outside the black hole is also subject to time dilation as it enters. Next to the US Army, Disney World is the largest buyer and importer of explosives in the USA. I was wondering what Mickey needed nukes for, before I remembered fireworks exist. What are they exploding? Kids. The Holy Roman Empire existed until 30 years after the United States was founded, 1776 to 1806. Everyone seems to forget about the Holy Roman Empire. All that stuff you learn about in history class about civilizations rising up and dying out, about certain groups killing off other groups and taking over their lands. That is still happening right now. I thought that stopped when I got out of school, especially the genocides. People talk about the Holocaust like it was an end-all genocide, but there are still genocides going on all around the world today. The UN keeps track of them and the situations that have the potential to become genocides. And there have been tons of genocides throughout history that we don't label as such or care about. Crazy shit. You've reached the end. You're a star. Destroy the subscribe button for more like that.